Welcome, everybody. We are here for one of our most treasured days here at Albany Law School, Kate Stoneman Day. Before we begin our festivities, we regret to inform you that our keynote speaker is unable to attend due to a personal emergency. We apologize. We wish her the best as she's dealing with the personal matter. We decided to proceed as scheduled, and we have in her place our own Professor Donna Young. Professor Donna Young has been in contact with Professor Fineman and has worked with her for many years. In fact, she was her student. And she is going to give her PowerPoint, give her remarks, and we are very grateful to Donna, and we wish Martha good health and safe travels. And that's a perfect way to end that sentence. So thank you. And so I apologize for that. I know many of you traveled to see her, but again, I'm sure that Professor Young will be wonderful in her stead. So I'd like to extend to all of you, our awardees, our guests, a very warm welcome. We are especially privileged today to have so many esteemed members of the bench and the bar with us tonight. Thank you for your continued support of Albany Law School. For those of you new to the Kate Stoneman program, you are in for a treat. This event honors the significant contributions of women in the law, and it is named for the first woman to graduate from Albany Law School, Kate Stoneman, class of 1898. Kate Stoneman challenged the discriminatory law of her day, and she became the very first woman to be admitted to practice law in the state of New York. That was in 1886. In 2009, Kate Stoneman was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame in Seneca Falls. It is fitting that March is Women's History Month. It is also fitting that 2018 is the 100th anniversary of the suffragette movement here in New York. The Kate Stoneman program is an important part of the law school. It allows us to celebrate the contributions of those who advance women in the legal profession. On a personal level, I always feel particularly honored to be part of this day. 17 years ago, when I first visited Albany Law School as a faculty candidate, it was fortuitously on Kate Stoneman Day. After staying for the program, it became quite clear to me that I had found home. Right there then, and I accepted the offer and have been here for 16 years since. And I still find it to be one of the most inspirational events that we have every year. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's event. Tonight, 3 women will join our prestigious circle of Kate Stoneman Award recipients, bringing to 78 the total number of extraordinary individuals honored since the program's inception in 1994. Our most recent inductee was United States Supreme Court Justice, the Honorable Sonia Sotomayor. At this time, I would like to ask all past Stoneman Award recipients who are with us tonight to stand and be recognized. You all continue to inspire us. I would like to acknowledge all who helped to make today possible. Jeff Sieber, there you are, Director of Alumni Relations and Institutional Events. Without him, this day would not have been possible. Special thanks to our Dean and President, Alicia Lillette, to Professors Mary Lynch and Donna Young, David Jaden, David Singer, Chris Colton, Peter Padone. Hope I didn't forget anyone. We'd also like to recognize the support of the Women's Law Caucus, who are with us here today and have been so instrumental in the planning of today. Special thanks also to our Alumni Stoneman Honorary Committee. I would like to take this opportunity to tell you about a couple different scholarships and works we have through Kate Stoneman. Minnie Netter, class of 72, made possible a scholarship for incoming law students. Our very first Stoneman Student Fellow, class of 2018, is here with us today. You can raise your hand or stand. Candice Williamson. She leaves very big shoes to fill when she graduates this year. Minnie Netter also helped found our graduation prize, which awards an annual scholarship to a law student who embodies the spirit and tenacity of Kate Stoneman on graduation. She also helped found our Kate Stoneman Chair in Law and Democracy, first held by Professor Katz. It is now bestowed upon our very own Mary Lynch, who I have the distinct pleasure now to welcome onto the stage.
I am incredibly honored and continually overawed to bear the name Kate Stoneman in my professional title. Stoneman Day honors a woman who spoke truth to power, the truth of the discrimination she saw in her day, the late 19th century. Despite the warning that any expression of her views in regard to women's rights was contrary to the wishes of her employer, and the courts, Kate continued to call out and work against injustices, both those she experienced and those she observed. Similarly, our first Stoneman Chair, Professor Katz, firmly spoke and wrote about the truths of her day, fighting for the ERA in the 1970s and for other civil rights causes throughout her life. So, what is the truth of our day? The revelations of this past year about sexual harassment in the highest echelons of our profession, in the chambers of the Ninth Circuit and at highly ranked top 100 big law firms, make clear that when it comes to gender, there is still hushed up places in our profession and much work to be done. Let's let today's celebration re-inspire us, reaffirm our support for all feminists and for women's varied paths to leadership and excellence in our profession. Speaking of effective leadership from someone who identifies as female, I am very honored to present to you the second female dean in 166 years of Albany law history, a big supporter of Kate Stoneman Day and the program, our president and dean, Alicia Ouellette.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you everyone for being here. I see so many judges and special friends of the law school in the audience. I'm not going to try to name you all, but I do want to welcome everybody who is here tonight. I also want to thank Professor Lynch for her words, and just say Professor Lynch, our current Stoneman professor, is, if you know her, she's really the living embodiment of Kate Stoneman. She is fierce and brilliant and unrelenting. And we thank you for your work in inspiring our students, and we are excited to present today 3 other women who are fierce, brilliant, and unrelenting. Kate Stoneman was an important and vocal figure in the New York suffragette movement, and she used her powers of persuasion to make change for social good. Well before her lawyering efforts, Stoneman attended a school for teachers for 2 years, which led to teaching jobs in Glens Falls, New York, and then Albany. She was, as we've heard, called out for speaking to her students about gender equality. That didn't stop her. In fact, she was active in helping to pass an 1880 bill that gave women in New York the right to be elected to school boards. And a few years later, she decided she wanted to go into law. Stoneman worked as a clerk for an Albany attorney while she was still teaching. She studied law at night with the plan to take the bar exam. So for people who are wondering, we're going to get to graduating from law school. That was the typical practice at the time, the typical process for someone to become a lawyer. After she did this studying, Stoneman took and passed the bar. But when she applied for admission, she was denied. The 3-judge panel found, quote, no precedent and no necessity for women to be able to practice law in New York. No precedent and no necessity. I think they got it wrong. The panel noted that for them to admit a woman, the legislature needed to change the law. So just to give some context nationally about what was going on at the time, Wyoming had appointed a woman judge in 1870, which was 16 years earlier. In 1872, Charlotte Ray was admitted to the D.C. bar. She was the first African-American woman admitted to the bar in the United States. In 1873, a little step backwards, in Bradwell versus Illinois, the U.S. Supreme Court held that states may statutorily deny women the right to practice law. In 1880, Belva Ann Lockwood was the first woman lawyer to argue a case before the U.S. Supreme Court. So clearly, New York was a bit behind. Stoneman didn't take no for an answer. With her circle of advocates, she changed the law in New York. She enlisted the support of Assemblyman John Platt of Poughkeepsie to have a bill to remove gender and racial qualifications from Section 56 of the Code of Civil Procedure. With the help of Stoneman's supporters, the bill became law. The bill stated, quote, "The race or sex of such persons shall constitute no cause for refusing such person admission to the practice in the courts of record of this state as an attorney or counselor. The act shall take effect immediately." 3 days after the bill was made law, Stoneman was admitted to practice. It was more than a decade later when Stoneman said, "I want to go to law school." And in 1896, she enrolled at Albany Law School at the age of 55. Here she studied for 2 years, and she graduated on June 2nd, 1898, becoming the first woman to graduate from Albany Law School. She stayed active in the women's movement. She served as an executive board member of the state's suffrage association and continued her work. So today, we celebrate the fierce and brilliant and unrelenting Kate Stoneman. We also honor 3 other women, Martha Fineman, Christine Chaffee, and the Honorable Joanne Winslow, each in her own right, fierce and brilliant and unrelenting. Their stories are sure to inspire you. They might even convince you to keep speaking up. So it is my honor to have you all here today to share this important day for Albany Law School. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Dean, for those wonderful remarks and also for that great historical background as well. And it is now time to give out the first 2 Kate Stoneman Awards. The awardees tonight and their introducers are so inspirational to all of us. They allow us to follow the paths that they have bravely paved and walk in their footsteps. So many parallels exist between the awardees and Kate Stoneman in their pioneering and trailblazing spirits. Our first award winner is Christine Chaffee, Albany Law School class of 1978. Introducing her today is another Stoneman awardee of 1999, Catherine Grant Madigan, also Albany Law School class of 1978.
Thanks so much, Professor. I am absolutely delighted to introduce my dear friend and colleague, Chris Chaffee, as the 2018 Kate Stoneman honoree this evening. We have been friends since our first year here at Albany Law in the fall of 1975. I think back then, we actually broke into double digits in terms of the number of women in the class. I think we were just under 12% female. And Chris back then, even then, had great courage when she joined me in the founding of what is now known as the Albany Law Misdemeanors Rugby Football Club. And without serious injury and all of our teeth, I can report. And as a preeminent trust and estate and elder law practitioner in the Capital District, Chris embodies the trailblazing spirit of Kate Stoneman, paving the way for other women lawyers, founding in 1995 what is now an all-female law firm, honored as a family-friendly employer
for its progressive policies and alternative work arrangements and promotion of work-life balance. I won't repeat her remarkable achievements, which are already detailed in your program, and I commend them to you. It's quite extraordinary. Like Kate Stoneman, Chris has never sought acclaim, the limelight, and like Kate Stoneman, she has seized every opportunity to make an enduring difference in our profession, in our communities, with her vision and her commitment. This evening, Chris is joined by her fan club, including 1977 alum, fellow rugger, and adorable husband, John Sharkey, her daughter, Sarah Sharkey, and grandson, Jack, son, Patrick Sharkey, and her daughter-in-law extraordinaire, 2011 alum, and associate at Chaffee, Cezak, and Will DeGruby, Lauren Sharkey, who, there she is right over there, with Margot. We also welcome Chris's brother, Larry Chaffee, and his family, along with some colleagues from her law firm, including, I think I saw Michelle Will DeGruby earlier, as well as Ann Sharp and Nicole Clothier, among other friends. Please stand so you can be recognized as Chris's fan club. Come on, don't be shy. And now, how about a really warm welcome for our 2018's Kate Stoneman honoree, Christine Chaffee.
So, Chris Chaffee, in recognition of your extraordinary achievements and your commitment to the ideals of Kate Stoneman, Albany Law School is proud to present the Kate Stoneman Award for 2018.
Yeah. Kate, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you to so many of my family and friends who came. We've invaded the place. I appreciate that so many of you took time out of your workday to get here by 5 o'clock. As we consider the progress that's been made in expanding women's opportunities in the law, I wanted to share a bit more of my personal history. Much has changed in my lifetime in the law. When I went home after Albany Law School to Schenectady to practice law in 1978, there were 5 women attorneys in the local bar association: Hazel Rodriguez, Mary Coffin, Athena Correa, Rita Tepeta, and Lillian Friedman. I was a generation younger than they, but they welcomed me. I joined a wonderful firm as the first woman attorney they had ever hired. When John and I married and had Sarah, I had a statutory maternity leave, sort of. I remember having client files in my hospital room. It was a 3-day stay back then, and I remember John bringing files back and forth from home to office during my maternity leave. The partners thought I would have a lot of quiet time to do trust accountings. The attorneys at this firm weren't bad men, they just had no precedent to follow, which made me realize that it was my job to change the paradigm. I felt strongly that other women should have different maternity leaves. 40 years later, I'm proud to have done my part. I'm part of a law firm of all women, and with my wonderful partners, we successfully manage the business of a small firm and offer a flexible workplace to women. I've also demonstrated to my community that women can preside over bar associations, bar foundations, hospital boards, and yes, even law firms. The challenge before us is how to keep the needle moving forward on a daily basis. Will we leave this inspired gathering and turn on the news and hear the latest degradation of women by some of the country's most powerful men? How will we continue the push to change the rules for our sisters and daughters and granddaughters?
Of course, there's no single answer, but it's my belief that we create the society we want, one life at a time. We each work in our own milieu, be it professional, a family at home, a business. Some of us are risk takers. Some prefer quieter, supporting roles. Each of us in our daily actions are, in fact, weaving and building a culture where women are valued, women are respected, and women are equal. The energy in this room today is positive. Like-minded men and women gathered to celebrate the expanding role of women in our society. Let's carry this mission and energy forward when we leave today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those inspiring remarks. We now give an award to another extraordinary woman, the Honorable Joanne Winslow, class of 1986. Here to introduce her is yet another Stoneman awardee from 2012 and an Albany Law School alum from the class of 1990. I'm so honored to be able to introduce to you our newest presiding justice of the 3rd Department Appellate Division, Justice Elizabeth Carey.
Thank you. Congratulations to each and all of the honorees who are gathered here this evening, past and present, and particularly to Chris Chaffee, who I will share. I've been fortunate enough to actually have her legal advice working with me, and she was the attorney for my mother. So, Kate Stoneman, as we've heard from our beloved dean, was a pioneer and a trailblazer, a woman who created opportunities where none seemed to exist. It is a joy to celebrate her in this manner by sharing in awards for women who follow in those same steps and show those traits. Since her graduation from Albany Law in 1986, Justice Joanne Winslow has established herself as a leader in our profession, and she has actively worked to pave the way for others. The mark of a pioneer is courage. Justice Winslow served as a prosecutor in the Monroe County District Attorney's Office for over 2 decades. She built a solid reputation there and spent most of her time in the Major Felony Bureau. She worked her way up, ultimately to be chief, prosecuting the toughest cases: drugs, gangs, murders, rapes. During a time when few women were involved in that work, a trailblazer guides and shows the way for others. Justice Winslow has been actively engaged in mentoring and showing the way throughout her entire career, both as a lawyer and as a judge. In addition to the mentoring that she performed while supervising attorneys in her role as a prosecutor, Joanne has been actively involved with the Women's Bar Association in a number of roles, and with the Association of Justices of the Supreme Court, which is where I first met her when we were both involved in revising a courtroom guide. I was immediately struck by her keen understanding of the law and her collaborative demeanor. It was no surprise that her appointment to the Appellate Division 4th Department was regarded as a tremendously well-deserved honor. She has and is now actively creating opportunities for others. Throughout her career, Justice Winslow has worked to improve diversity and inclusion. She has engaged in extensive educational and outreach efforts through her work with the organized bar. Most recently, she has taken on the role as co-chair of the Richard C. Fela LGBTQ Commission on the Courts. Groundbreaking yet again. Like Kate Stoneman, Justice Winslow is a pioneer and a trailblazer, a role model who has worked to advance the role of women in our profession and the interests of women. Come on forward. Okay. Justice Joanne Winslow, for your record of extraordinary achievements and commitment to the ideals of Kate Stoneman, we are honored to present you with the 2018 Kate Stoneman Award.
I brought props, I'm going to do this old school. Justice Carey, thank you very much. So, the first question I'll pose to all of you is, what do circus performers in the Barnum Valley Circus, a lace mill worker, and an Albany Law School moot courtroom have in common? Now, this is not a trick question. Might sound like it, but it's not. But if you knew me pretty well, you would know the correct answer to that question. The circus performers were my paternal grandparents. And the caption reads, Billy Winslow touring in his airship, Barnum and Bailey Show, 1910. And this is the lace mill worker, my maternal grandmother. So, while the circus performers likely have aided me in my courtroom performance over the last 2+ decades, it is my belief that the most important thing that they did, which contributed to my success, is the same thing that the lace mill worker did to contribute to my success, and that is my parents. My parents who instilled in me a strong work ethic, the importance of education, and values that include honesty, a dedication to equality for everyone, and a deep commitment to doing the right thing. I want to begin by thanking GRAWA, which is those of you not from the western part of New York, the Greater Rochester Association for Women Attorneys, and in particular Heidi Schultz-Gregory, who is also an alumnus of this fine institution from 1993, and she also is a former Kate Stoneman Award winner. And I got to say that the committee certainly got it right in giving her award in 2016. She has been a fantastic role model for women. She's been a mentor to many new female attorneys, and she is highly respected in the Greater Rochester area, both for her work with her employer and also for her volunteerism in the Rochester legal community. So to Heidi, who was going to try to be here, but I don't believe that she is, thank you, Heidi. I also want to extend my thanks to the Kate Stoneman Award Committee for selecting me as a recipient of this year's Kate Stoneman Award. I am certainly cognizant of how much work and effort goes into selecting an award recipient and determining who it is that will receive it. Dean Ouellette has informed me that the Stoneman Award and Kate Stoneman Day is one of Albany Law School's most important and celebrated occasions, and that tells me that selecting each year's recipients is indeed very hard work, very important work. So I thank the committee, and I specifically want to extend my thanks to Professor Melissa Brager, and also to Jeff Sieber, and also to David Jaden, who was my guide to get me here on time today. Yes, Jill, I said on time.
They've demonstrated the utmost in professionalism, and they've also been incredibly thoughtful in carrying out every possible detail and making sure that this was very easy for me. Presiding Justice Gary, thank you for your kind words. I was wondering at one point who it was you were talking about. But thank you for taking time from what I know to be a busy schedule to introduce me today. I'm just going to repeat it. Justice Gary is a 1990 graduate of Albany Law School and a 2012 Kate Stoneman Award winner. And they got it right that year as well. It seems to me they get it right every time. This year, we know one is right. The other, time will tell. I met Justice Gary, as she described, through our work on the New York State bench book for trial judges a number of years ago, and I found her to be just as a recent New York Law Journal article described her when quoting the clerk of the Third Department, who said that she was universally respected, bright, and incredibly capable, and I would echo that. Our paths crossed again more recently, as she also described, when Chief Judge Janet DiFiore established the landmark, I would say, New York State Commission, which has now been named the Richard C. Fiala LGBTQ Commission. Justice Gary was one of the co-chairs originally, and with her new and increased duties, she lateraled that duty, and I was there to catch it. And I'm very excited about that. Thank you. It is through that work that I began to know Judge Gary even better, and I truly value your mentorship, and I know that that will continue. Thank you, Judge Gary. So when I opened, I posed a question, and the only part that I have not explained is what part the Albany Law School moot courtroom had to contribute and had to do with my standing here in front of you today. First of all, this was not a moot courtroom when I was here. When I was here, this was the library. And the building that now houses the library was the senior parking. And it was, yes, the year I was a senior when I would have gotten to park right next to the building that they did away with that. But I don't hold a grudge. But the Albany Law School moot courtroom has everything to do with why I'm standing here in front of you today. It is in the moot courtroom that I discovered my true passion, my true calling, and that it was to be in a courtroom, that I would spend my life in a real courtroom. Sheila Shea, who many of you know as the Third Department's Mental Hygiene Legal Services Director, was my best friend in law school, and she was Joyce Mitchell to me. And Sheila, what was that important line that you had to deliver when you were Joyce Mitchell? Do you remember? I'll never forget his face. She was the bank teller that got robbed in my senior prize trial competition. And it was through that competition and with Sheila's help and assistance that I realized what my direction would be and that my legal career would take me to the courtroom. The legal foundations that this institution provided to me gave me a basis for success, along with the circus and the lace mill, my parents. Justice Gary referred to me as a trailblazer, and I'm humbled by that. I also have been fortunate to have achieved many firsts, but being first does not define success. It does provide you, however, with opportunity, and it is what you do with that opportunity that makes a difference. You don't choose a path as a trailblazer, it chooses you. And if it is true that I'm a trailblazer, it is because it chose me. I cannot say that I set out to blaze a trail for others to follow. I can say that I did have a dream, that I followed that dream, and that dream required establishing goals, working really hard to meet those goals, and having the help and support of a lot of people over the years. I didn't do this by myself. I had a lot of help. And I had a lot of luck, too. I don't want to underestimate that. To that, I brought the values that the circus, the lace mill, and the moot courtroom left me with, but to that I added my unique personality, which is sort of coming out here a bit, I imagine. Probably comes back from that circus picture, I don't know. But also I brought with that my deep compassion for others. I brought with that my need for education, and my need to educate, and a desire to make it better for those who followed me. So before I do sit down, I want to extend a few personal thank yous. First, I want to thank my 94-year-old mother, Marjorie. She could not be here today. It's hard for her to come to an event a mile north. We're from Kingston. And I'm hoping that she's saving up her energy to come visit me soon. So I'd much rather that she come visit me than come here. And the message I hope that gets brought back to her by my family is that I have answered and reassured her fear. Because when I graduated from college, I was trained as a teacher, and I was teaching for 2 years, and I saw the tuition at this fine institution rising, not anywhere near what it's at now. But I had to pay my own way, and I figured if I don't go, I won't get to go. So I decided to stop teaching after 2 years and come here. And my mother said to me, "You're going to waste that education that you got as a teacher." So I hope that now she knows that I haven't wasted that I did use my training as a teacher, and I will continue to use my training as a teacher by having gone to law school and been a lawyer. I want to thank my brothers, Jim and Rick, who have always been there for me and have always had my back. I also want to thank my nephew, Evan, who traveled all the way from, I think it's Western New Jersey, near Philadelphia, to be here today. And lastly, but not least, I want to thank my partner, Lynn, who is sitting dead center in front of me and wondering why I'm doing this to her. As a judge, I make decisions for a living, and the best decision I've ever made was Lynn Smith. She puts up with me at my best, which is what I bring to work every day, but she also puts up with me at my worst and at everything in between, and she's how I recharge so that I can be my best when I go to work. Lynn, I love you and thank you. You know, I'm truly humbled by accepting this award, and it honors someone and celebrates something that's so important in the school's history. And I shall do all in my power to continue to live up to such an example, and as Professor Lynch said, there's a lot more work to be done, and I'm going to keep on keeping on. Thank you very much.
More inspiring remarks. I told you so. Well, let's have another round of applause for our amazing first two 2018 Kate Stoneman recipients. It is now time to hear the prepared remarks from our keynote professor, Martha Albertson Fineman, which will be delivered by Professor Donna Young. Thank you to Professor Young for doing this and bringing Professor Fineman to the law school.
So I first want to congratulate everyone who has been an award recipient today and in the past. I am going to be introducing Martha. That was my original task. Oops, was that me? Oh gosh, okay. That was my original task, but I will also be reading her remarks. So what I will do first is to introduce her, to talk about why she is so deserving of this award. So I have been given the great privilege of introducing her, and I have also been given the great privilege of reading her remarks. But first, let me explain why I think Martha warrants such an honor. As you know, the Kate Stoneman Awards are given to those who have demonstrated a commitment to seeking change and expanding opportunities for women. Just a little over a year ago, I flew to San Francisco to the annual Association of American Law Schools convention, where Martha was being given the Ruth Bader Ginsburg Lifetime Achievement Award. And I flew there in order to present her with the award, or to introduce her for that award. Like our Kate Stoneman Award, the notorious RBG Award, as I like to call it, is given to an individual who has had a distinguished career of teaching, service, and scholarship for at least 20 years, and who has impacted women, the legal community, the academy, and the issues that affect women through mentoring, writing, speaking, activism, and by providing opportunities to others. I can think of no one more deserving of that award and of the Kate Stoneman Award than Professor Fineman. Her achievements are set out in the program, so I won't repeat them here, but please indulge me while I add a few details, personal details. In addition to being a prolific writer, an inspiring teacher, an adept conference organizer, and a dedicated mother and grandmother, and a loyal and generous friend, Martha has been one of the most active and committed mentors in the legal academy. And aside from mentoring her own students, most of the rest of her mentoring has been done through her feminism and legal theory workshop series that she founded almost 35 years ago when she was a professor at the University of Wisconsin Law School. Through these series of workshops, Martha has nurtured and given a platform to hundreds of aspiring academics, practitioners, and activists. When she moved from Wisconsin to Columbia Law School, then to Cornell Law School, and then finally to Emory Law School, she took the workshop with her. The Feminism and Legal Theory project is no ordinary academic workshop. It has been taking place between 2 to 4 times a year for the last 24 years or so, almost 30 years. And it has attracted attorneys and academics from multiple disciplines from all over the United States and the world, all of whom see their participation in the workshop as one of the best ways to present their research on some of the most important and groundbreaking legal issues of the day in a rigorous but always supportive environment. The goal of Martha's workshops is to foster interdisciplinary examinations of the ways in which the interaction of law and culture shape expectations, policies, and practices related to gender, age, race, class, ability, and sexuality. It has also generated a new theoretical venture in the Vulnerability and the Human Condition initiative that moves beyond identities to bring together diverse perspectives and disciplines to advance a social justice framework rooted in the universality of human vulnerability and the need for a responsive state. The Vulnerability and Human Condition Initiative is interested in finding ways to ensure meaningful and universal equality of access and opportunity that specifically takes into account the state's responsibility to address existing entrenched privilege and disadvantage, not just prohibited forms of discrimination. But aside from coming up with an entirely new and groundbreaking legal theory, and having that legal theory form the basis of 2 interdisciplinary projects at Emory and at the University of Leeds in the UK, it's Martha's role as mentor that I'd like to highlight as one of the most important reasons she is so deserving of the Kate Stoneman Award. Martha has supported and nurtured the academic, legal, and activist careers of countless men and women in the United States and abroad, and she has done so enthusiastically and selflessly. In fact, 3 of her former students are here with us today. Professor Martha McCluskey, who teaches at the University of Buffalo. Our very own Professor Halewood, who is also a student of Martha's. And Judge Jenny Rivera from the New York State Court of Appeals, who is also, where are you, Jenny? There you are, a student of Martha's. And though Martha has mentored all 4 of us, and literally dozens and dozens of other men and women, I want to focus a bit on the role that Martha has played in my career, just to give you a taste of the kind of person she is. In the fall of 1992, I moved to New York City from Toronto with my then boyfriend, who had just finished clerking for the Ontario Court of Appeal
and he was just beginning a graduate program in law at Columbia Law School. Some of you know him as my colleague, Professor Peter Halewood. I had only just graduated from law school the year before and thought that spending some time in New York City would be fun, while Peter did the hard work of going to graduate school at Columbia Law. Moving to the States, by the way, was supposed to be temporary. We planned to be back in Toronto after a year, but here we are. That was 1992. In the meantime, Martha Fineman met Peter at Columbia Law School. She began mentoring him, because that's what she does. And then she found out that I, a recent law school graduate and an unemployed feminist, was at home. So she asked Peter to invite me to her feminist reading group that met at her apartment every week. The group consisted mostly of her graduate students at Columbia. I wasn't even her student, and she didn't even know me. She just heard about me. But it was from there that I began attending her feminism and legal theory workshops, and from there I began moderating panel discussions at the feminist and legal theory workshops, and from there I began giving my own papers at the workshops. And this was all because she provided the opportunity and expected no less. Soon I was applying to law school teaching positions, and of course Martha was by my side helping me with my job talk, and we always had white wine during all of these, right? And Martha is well known for having white wine with ice cubes, which she introduced me to, and I kind of like, but anyway. And then she was one of my references for the job that I have right now. Fast forward a little bit, only about a year since then, I began teaching at Albany Law School as a visiting professor. Then I was offered a tenure-track position after a year. But I had also been accepted to the graduate program at Columbia Law School, so now it was my turn to pursue a graduate degree in law. And I took a 2-year leave of absence from the law school to pursue graduate studies while Halewood came to the law school. So I was now doing the graduate program, and Halewood was here teaching. While at Columbia, Martha became one of my thesis advisors, and most people don't know this, but at the same time, she was already one of Peter's thesis advisors. And as an aside, another one of Peter's advisors is Professor Patricia Williams, who gave the Keynote Kate Stoneman address in 2013. Anyway, Peter and I never did make it back to Canada to live, and 25 years later, I'm here to introduce all of you to Martha's amazing work. And through the years, Martha has inspired my scholarship and my teaching and my mothering, where I've tried to pass down her wisdom to my students and to my 2 sons. Her sound advice has played an enormous role in guiding my career. And I'm just one of hundreds of others who have been fortunate enough to have had her as the fierce feminist role model that she is. It is with great affection and high praise that I congratulate her for being one of the most notorious and dare I say nasty women in the Academy. And with that, I will turn to her remarks. So now this is stuck, and I'm not quite sure why. Oh, let's see, sorry, no. Yeah, okay, good. So just to prove to you that Martha was actually here in Albany, this was taken this morning. Unfortunately, after a 17-hour drive to Albany yesterday, where she stayed over at her daughter's and she made a couple of stops, but she got to Albany yesterday afternoon and then was called away on an emergency. And it was this morning. She kind of warned me. She said, if I can't make it tomorrow, Donna, can you please give my remarks? And I said, absolutely. And I was thinking, no. I don't really want to, but okay, fine, I will. So here I am. But this is Martha, and as you can see, I have very little tiny shoes to fill. That's really how she and I are. So she would be about here. Okay. So I will begin with her remarks. I'm going to be reading her remarks, and I'm only adding a couple of little things that I've already talked to her about, but these are her remarks. Learning about Kate Stoneman's life has been inspiring, and I'm deeply honored to have been given this opportunity to reflect on the historic and contemporary significance of women in law. Thank you, she says to you. Thank you. The first topic I want to address is that of inclusion or diversity. I will be talking about gender, but I'm also aware of other categories of historic exclusion that are equally significant. Kate Stoneman was born in 1841 on a farm in upstate New York. She benefited from some of the historic battles that had already been waged by women for inclusion. For example, she attended the New York Normal School in 1864 and eventually began a career as a teacher. The Normal School was a 2-year institution. Its curriculum revolved around teaching the subjects taught in the common or the elementary schools, and significantly, it did admit women. In fact, after the Civil War, its student body became heavily female, reflecting the feminization of American common school education that occurred at the time. Access to higher education for women was not the norm during the early 1800s. Exclusion of women was urged at the time because of scientific speculation about how education might affect women's naturally ordained roles as homemakers, wives, and mothers. Some medical professionals at the time went so far as to suggest that feeding the brain might starve the ovaries. Yes. Prior to the Civil War, only 2 private colleges, Oberlin and Antioch, admitted women, and even then, some classes were exclusively male. Gender segregation in higher education was the norm, and female students were treated in some interesting ways. For example, at Oberlin, women were excused from Monday classes so that they could do the laundry for the male students. Of course, Martha would have done that. I'm just doing what she would have done. Of course, the nation also had women's colleges. Between 1836 and 1875, 50 women's colleges were founded, including the prestigious Seven Sisters partners of the men's Ivy League schools, Barnard, Smith, Mount Holyoke, Vassar, Bryn Mawr, Wellesley, and Radcliffe. But women wanting an education in law had an even more difficult route. I'm just going to leave this in the background. You can take a look at it, but some of the women who are already mentioned in previous remarks are up there, and their achievements. No law schools accepted women. Some received training in law offices. Kate Stoneman, for example, worked as a copyist for the New York Court of Appeals while a student and also with a family friend in his office. In 1885, Stoneman became the first woman to pass the New York State Bar exam. When she applied for admission to the bar in 1886, however, at the age of 45, she was denied entry because she was a woman. The 3 judges handling the application, I think Dean Willett said this earlier, handling the application found that there was no precedent, no English precedent, and no necessity for her admission. Further, the New York Code of Civil Procedure required that the admittee be male. Interestingly, just prior to her bar application, a bill had been introduced removing gender requirements for admittance to the bar. But the bill was stuck in the Judiciary Committee until Kate Stoneman launched a successful lobbying campaign and secured its passage. She wisely, Martha notes, did not follow Myra Bradwell and pursue litigation. She went the legislative route. On May 20th, 1886, with the new legislation in hand, Stoneman reapplied for admission to the bar. Her application was accepted, and she became New York's first female lawyer. And in 1896, she enrolled at the Albany Law School. On June 2nd, we've said this before, but on June 2nd, 1898, at the age of 57, she became the first woman to graduate from Albany Law School. Of course, since the 19th century, things have gotten better for women in the legal profession. In particular, the late 1960s and the 1970s were a period of real expansion in regard to gender equality. Law itself spurred the transformation. Civil rights laws codified equality as both aspiration and objective. Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act and, in 1972, Title IX, provided for equal treatment or equal protection for groups formerly excluded, including women, particularly significant in regard to law school admissions. These measures condemned discrimination and exclusion. Gender equality had the effect of shifting the focus away from assessing and managing women's assumed differences, delicacy and timidity. The mandate was that women be treated the same as men. Achieving absolute equality in either numbers or compensation has not been easily accomplished, however. There was initial resistance to gender equality laws in the profession. For example, in 1983, King and Spalding argued that Title VII should not apply to positions of partner in law firms. They constituted a special category. This was an unsuccessful argument. That was 1983. Today, happily, obvious and blatant forms of employment discrimination are much less common than they were prior to the civil rights interventions. We see encouraging statistics on the entry level, both in law school admissions and employment after graduation. Today, women make up at least half of law school classrooms, and once outside of law school, women are hired at law firms at a similar rate to men. We also see increases in women faculty and deans at law schools, and today, 3 of the 9 Supreme Court justices are women. Women judges at other levels have also increased. Gender parity, while not totally achieved, has at least advanced. In addition, women in law have changed law substantively. Reforms of family law and areas of criminal law have been accomplished adopting women's perspectives and experiences. New causes of action, such as sexual harassment and domestic violence, have now been recognized. What was accomplished was not just the inclusion of women into the profession, but a reconsideration of the rules, some of the rules, of the game once we were there. However, neither substantive transformation nor gender equality are complete. Both await this new generation. As for inclusion, both big law and the academy seem particularly difficult areas for equality. Efforts to achieving gender parity seem to have stalled, giving rise to the slogan, "The higher we rise, the fewer we are," when it comes to women in these areas of the legal profession. Obviously, the next question is, why has progress at these particular levels been so problematic for women? In the latter part of the 20th century, women's lack of progress in the academy and among highly paid partnerships in big law firms was often described as a pipeline problem. But today, this would be seen as an inadequate and downright misleading assertion. Women now earn more than half of all law degrees. Based on credentials, women are as highly educated and eminently qualified for professional achievement and advancement as men. So why do numbers fall as women proceed through the legal profession pipeline? Several explanations are offered: bias, continued discrimination. Perhaps not overt, but persistent stereotypes may also work against women in higher realms of legal education and big law. This was certainly true in the later part of the 20th century. In 1974, when the brilliant co-author of the Uniform Commercial Code, Sonia Metchnikoff, left the University of Chicago to become dean at the University of Miami, I, Martha, along with 18 or so women students in her class,
petitioned the law school to appoint another woman on the faculty. So this is now in 1974. The response: there isn't a woman in the country qualified to become a professor at the University of Chicago Law School. This was during the same time period in which both Sandra Day O'Connor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg were looking for law jobs, ones where typing was not the major skill. On the other end of the spectrum, we should not forget the superwoman stereotype forged in some versions of feminism. Women can earn the bacon just like a man, bring it home, fry it, serve it to her adoring husband and child. Beyond mere success, we must project effortless perfection. This is from a Duke University gender study report. And this is what we will be measured against. And of course, there's the refrain that women have to live with their choices. Researchers point to the fact that women have different preferences, which is why they are overrepresented in soft fields, such as family law or public service, and forego corporate or finance areas. This is related to stereotyping. The problem is then construed as a difficulty of getting women into those fields. We do not ask why those fields should be considered more desirable, either socially or individually. There may be more money to be gained, but surveys of big law attorneys show job satisfaction is very low and has been for decades. Conditions of employment are abysmal by some measures. Family time, ethics, and dignity are sacrificed for high salaries. Is it all about the disparity in income? Realistically, turning to individual client fees or efforts to substantially increase governmental largesse to equalize salary differential is unrealistic. But some subsidies could help, perhaps fortifying tuition waivers or establishing professional associations, pooled funding in those areas where clients are not corporations. Finally, some commentaries assert that many qualified women are confined to low-ranking positions by a persistent set of intangible systemic barriers that make it more difficult to advance women, also known as motherhood. In law, as in other professions, the career clock tends to overlap with the biological clock, which dictates if and when women are likely to have children. As a result, women have to make a distinctive choice with significant career implications that most men can avoid. When Martha was facing the implications of that sort of dilemma many years ago, she used to joke that there were 3 things that we desire in life: an intimate partner, children, and a career. She used to tell her students in feminist legal theory classes that given how society was organized, women at most could only do 2 of the 3 well. Preparing for this talk brought this jest back to mind. And I'm going to interject my own comments here just to add a little bit of background that's not in her prepared remarks. When Martha began law school at the University of Chicago, she had 2 5-month-old twin sons and 2 older daughters. And for most of the time at law school, and then for the rest of her career thereafter, she raised all 4 of them on her own. Statistics on current leadership in higher education reveal that 89% of men in very senior positions are married, while only 63% of women in such positions are. Further, 93% of men in such positions have children, while only 71% of women have children. Of course, one could argue that a commitment to gender equality is more pronounced in younger generations. Men will share more in domestic and childcare. However, one study of graduate student researchers found that the number of students, both male and female, who said they plan to have children dropped by nearly half over a 20-year period. For these students, children are the expendable third desire. On the other hand, the American Council on Education found that women who already had achieved significant positions within higher education did not want or were not sure about seeking higher positions, particularly the presidency of universities. The predominant reason
they gave was that the nature of the work was unappealing. In reality, such advanced positions are not open to women, particularly those who hope to have time for a family life. For them, career was what could be compromised or foregone. And interestingly, these sorts of advancement and retention problems are more likely to be the result of biases, not discrimination. Big law firms realize the value of diversity. Clients care, as does society. The problem is not lawyers who are women, but lawyers who are mothers. This is called the maternal wall. The biases here are not against women, but in favor of a certain workplace culture and set of norms that stigmatize things like flexible working schedules, derogatorily referred to as mommy tracks. In addition, the ambiguity of gender equality is a problem. Formal equality renders motherhood invisible and overlooks non-work demands or desires relevant to women and others that should be taken into account if diversity and inclusion are to be accomplished. When Martha was an untenured faculty member at the University of Wisconsin in the early 1980s, a progressive, and she has this in quotes, a progressive senior colleague admonished her not to expect special treatment because she was a single mother of 4 children. Her response was that she didn't expect special treatment, but when she met the tenure standards, she would expect recognition that she did it in spite of a set of special circumstances that would have done in most of her male colleagues. What happened here was that male norms applied equally. Academic standards demanded that the inclusion of women should not alter those norms, and assimilation was key, not accommodation. Almost 2 decades later, when she was the Morris T. Moore Professor at Columbia Law School, Cravath, Swain, and Moore proudly invited her to see their new daycare facility for associates. Here, this was an example of accommodation in the interest of gender equality, by accommodation to standards established when the workplace was mostly male. The daycare center was established so that when children were ill, nannies didn't show up, or school holidays interfered with the job, women would still be able to work long hours and on weekends. And I talked to Martha this morning and told her about a student project of a student in my gender and work class last semester who I saw, and I don't see her now, but I won't point her out. But and I told her this example, and she thought it was a great example of what she was talking about. My student wrote a paper on a new kind of employment benefit that is growing in some professional jobs, paying for women to freeze their eggs. Have you heard of this? The idea, I'm looking for her still, okay. The idea is that providing this kind of benefit to female workers, by providing this benefit to female workers, the employer can get the most out of women while they are younger and not yet mothers. If women can just delay having children, then everyone would be better off. Women who want to establish their careers, employers who want years and years of productive labor. This is just another example of an accommodation termed a benefit that does nothing to transform the workplace from one that was primarily designed to accommodate the traditional ideal male worker, who's someone whose family responsibilities are taken care of by someone else and is therefore free to work long hours on weekends and free to travel on call. Back to Martha, there has to be a better way. This is where the transformation aspiration comes in. There have to be cultural shifts within the legal profession, and here it is not alone. Americans are overworked compared with those professions in other advanced industrialized societies. But they will not happen until women and men who want a more balanced life collectively rethink what it means to be a person who is also a legal professional. I think this is a collective responsibility, a rethinking that has to begin in the academy and continue in the practice and in the profession. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Young, and I hope that you will convey to Professor Fineman our best wishes from everyone for good health and safe travels. So I would be presenting the award to Professor Fineman, but I'd like to, rather than do a formal presentation, just say that Albany Law School is thrilled to welcome Professor Fineman to the ranks of the incredible women and men who make up the Stoneman Awardees, and we are honored to be able to offer in absentia the 2018 Miriam M. Netter Class of 1972 Kate Stoneman Award to Professor Fineman.
Thank you, Professor Young, for Professor Fineman's remarks, which were incredibly thought-provoking. As an aside, the award that Professor Young talked about, the notorious RBG Award, we can claim 3 of the 4 awardees as Stoneman keynotes. So Martha Fineman, this 2017, Marina Angel, and Herman Hill Kay. So we have that as well. In closing, I wanted to talk about one of, I don't know if he's here, but Justin Devendorf, a third-year law student, just wrote a wonderful news article on All Over Albany. And what I shared with him is very much in keeping with what many of us have said today. What does Kate Stoneman, he asked me, what does Kate Stoneman mean to law students? And I said, today reminds us of the idea that gender equality is a concept most people can agree upon theoretically. But Kate Stoneman actually personified the concept in practice. She has inspired countless law students who may not even grasp how difficult and how timely Kate's struggles to achieve gender equality have proven to be. Kate Stoneman and her legacy remind all of us how much progress we have made in the area of gender in the law, yet also how much more progress we still need to achieve in order for there to be true gender equality under the law. And I think Professor Fineman's comments highlight that intensively so. This now concludes our program, and on behalf of Albany Law School, I want to thank each and every one of you for attending. I want you to please join the speakers and award recipients at a reception in the East Foyer. Thank you very much for being here and for everything you do for Albany Law School.